back in May I spent a few days in Malta for a wedding, and of course I had to cram in as much photography as I could while I was there. Following on from Berlin, my Kodak Ultra F9 had a few shots of Kodak ColorPlus 200 remaining in it, and I also took a couple of rolls of Kodak Gold 200 with me on this trip. Day 1 began with a 5 AM flight, and instead of being a responsible adult and getting a decent amount of sleep the night before, I opted for the excited child going on holiday option of an hour's sleep on the plane. After settling into the house we'd be staying in for the next few nights, we headed out to start exploring the island, starting in Slima. In a delirious state from the lack of sleep and fueled only by strong coffee, I started taking the first few shots of this trip. You'd be forgiven for thinking this shot was taken in 1980s Miami, which is exactly what appealed to me about this building. One of the really cool things about Malta is that the whole island feels like a throwback to an earlier decade, which makes it perfect to shoot on film. There's something about Coca-Cola signs on film that create a great vintage look. I wish I'd got a couple more shots of this bar, and definitely intend to the next time I'm there. I spotted quite a few of these old converted buses around Malta, but this one just really caught my eye, with its bright yellow making it a nice focal point for the shot. Malta is full of these long streets with something to see down all of them. I'm not sure how I managed to take this shot so off centre, but it kind of worked out okay as I ended up with a reflection of the guy walking in the window to the right. It's become kind of a rule for me now that if I see an old photography shop with vintage signs like this, I have to get a shot of it on film. I really like the contrast in this one between the old shop and the newer one right next to it. I think this is easily my favourite shot from day 1. The vintage look of the moped with the arched doors behind really represent Malta, and the lack of anything too modern in the shot makes it feel like it could have been taken any time in the last 50 years. It only took a few attempts of me pissing about, almost lying down to get the best angle, before deciding I probably didn't even need to be down that low anyway. That was about it for day 1, and as the wedding was the next day, any film photography was put on hold. It turned out that the wedding had a free bar, which seriously decreased the chances of any film photography being done the day after. Thankfully I was only a little bit hungover, and it turns out that having a swim in the Mediterranean Ocean is actually a pretty good hangover cure, so I was good to go later in the day. Mdina, known as the Silent City, would be where I'd shoot the majority of the remaining film shots on this trip. For somewhere known as the Silent City, Mdina certainly didn't live up to its name, and sadly for the most part was packed with tourists. This didn't stop me from getting some really nice shots here, despite a lot of extra time waiting for people to pass by. This was the last shot on the roll of ColorPlus 200, and as far as last shots go, I'm pretty happy with it. The winding street acting as a leading line along with some light and shadow on the wall make for a pretty nice composition. I loaded up a roll of Kodak Gold 200 and carried on shooting around Mdina. So you might be wondering what a car is doing down the street this narrow. Well, despite being a huge tourist attraction, Mdina is still populated with just under 100 people living there. From the top of the walls in Mdina, you get some pretty incredible views with rolling fields and towns in the distance. It's just a shame the sky was so grey on this day, as some dramatic clouds would have really added to these shots. This is my favourite shot from Mdina. There's so much going on here, from the archway framing the buildings rising within it, to the fade from light to shadow on the walls, a perfect last shot within the narrow streets of the silent city. Outside of Mdina, I finally completed a rite of passage that all film photographers must at some point complete, taking a photo of an old petrol station. The second shot I took here came after waiting a good 10 minutes for a car to move out of the frame after they decided to have the longest conversation at a petrol station I've ever witnessed. Fucking move. On a heavily overcast last day of the trip, we took the boat over to the city of Valletta. The first few shots I took there were at the National War Museum at Fort St. Elmo. I really like how moody this shot is, and lighthouses always make for a dramatic subject. I think the idea was maybe better than the execution on this second lighthouse shot, as you can barely make it out between the bars, but this shot still has some nice depth to it. Back in the bustling streets of Valletta, I took the final film shots of the trip. It's just a shame we didn't get a sunny day here, as some nice light would have looked incredible in these shots. So I'd definitely like to return to Malta to shoot more film. As I said earlier, the whole place kind of feels like a throwback to another decade, which makes it really good for shooting on film. And Valletta especially, I'd love to go back on a brighter, sunnier day. Thank you for watching. I promise I will upload on this channel again a bit sooner this time. It won't be 4 months again. And I'll see you in the next one.